A beauteous morning, everyone, and a special welcome to HOWA's virtual caravan class in Solar Size Matters. There will be a 30-minute talk from our presenter, followed by 30 minutes for questions and answers. The chat will open up at 9:25 for you to submit your questions on the topic of Solar Size Matters. The class ends at 10. However, the chat feature will remain open for an additional 15 minutes to continue interaction with the presenter and attendees. I'm enthused to introduce you to our speaker for this morning, a digital nomad who enjoys travel and getting to know strangers, Val Adam Wit. Several years ago, Val designed her own simple off-grid camper van that includes a solar system. This gives her freedom to live, work, and play wherever she wants, city, desert, or mountain. She enjoys helping newbie nomads to figure out the right amount of solar for their own freedom on the road. Please welcome Val Adam Wit. Thank you.
Good morning. Morning. Thank you, Alicia. Thanks everybody for being here. This is wonderful. I am so honored that HOWA invited me to share a little bit about my experience and my knowledge that I've come to by actually just figuring it out myself, what I needed to travel on the road. I've traveled in a travel trailer and also a van, a Chevy Express van. And I say that because you need to think about, as I had to think about, what space is on my roof if we're talking solar. So for this discussion today, the time we have together, I thought that we could speak in terms of solar, charge controllers, batteries, which have amps, and then inverters. So I'm going to encourage you to take notes because we're going to cover a lot and to write your questions down so we can discuss a little bit after I've presented some information to you. I'm going to give you some information up front so I don't forget. I want to encourage you to go find if you're just in the planning stages of your system, to go find a solar calculator. That is something online. The Renogy website has one, but other websites have one too. And I'll refer to Renogy throughout the presentation because I know that Bob really likes the quality of their products. He likes the quality of many products. But Renogy has in one stop in their website, Renogy.com, they have quite a bit of information. There you'll find solar kits, you'll find individual solar components, and you'll find a calculator. They have a Learn tab. And once you do that, then you'll be able to plug in. One of the things you'll want to do before you even get to that calculator, you can have a look around, of course, but before you get to the calculator, to use the calculator, will be, as I've had to do, write down every single thing you're using, every single thing that you use in a 24-hour period, and how long you use those items for, your appliances, anything that you need to power, to give power to. And I suggest just keeping a running list on your phone and a tablet somewhere, notepad, that you jot down as you go through things. Oh yeah, I used the microwave this morning. How much? 10 minutes. I'll use it tonight, so on and so forth, right? How often you're charging your phone? How many times you need to put your phone or tablet on the charger? So while we're talking through this, as I said, we'll talk about solar, and I'll talk about solar in terms of the rating for solar is watts. And please don't get overwhelmed by that terminology. And we'll talk about batteries, and batteries expend energy in amp hours. The batteries store our energy, and then expend energy in amp hours. For the purposes of this discussion today, I think I'd like to keep batteries as one battery, deep cycle. We'd be talking about deep cycle AGM batteries, which means we're not talking about lead acid batteries. That would be like the starter battery in your vehicle. We're talking about the house battery. Your house battery is anything in the coach, and your coach would be your van or in an RV, the living side of your vehicle. So that will be your coach battery or your house battery. And that house battery we're talking about, we're going to assume that it has 100 amp hours. of stored energy. I say this because you can buy a battery that has maybe 87, 84, that sort of thing, if you or 107. But for this discussion, let's just assume it has 100. Okay. So our solar, our sun, our sun hits our panels. Let's just talk about how the energy moves. It hits the panels, and when it hits the panels, it goes through a charge controller. That's just this device that allows us to control a little bit how much of that energy is going into the batteries, so we don't overcharge the batteries. Just the simplest terms, right? Sun hits the panels, goes through the charge controller. Charge controller determines how much is going to go into the battery. And we are storing this energy is basically what we're doing. So we're storing energy so that after the sun goes down, we have energy to use for the rest of the evening, to watch a movie on our tablets or to do whatever we need to cook maybe. I cook with electric sometimes, some of us do. So that would be it. So I want to talk to you about different solar packages. For example, some of us have 100 watts of solar, a panel on our roof, or we might put it out in the sun to catch the rays so we get energy stored in our batteries during the day. I want to talk about a 100 watt panel versus a 200 watt panel and system versus a 300 watt and a 400 watt. Okay, before we get to the 100 watt, some of you who are in the beginning stages of your design or who may not have big solar or big power needs may just need to charge the things that we're charging. Remember I said we might need to charge like a battery or a phone and so on. I should tell you a little bit about how I arrived at my solar needs. As I mentioned, I listed everything that I used during the day. So from I woke up till I went to sleep, I wrote down everything. And then, was I using power while I was sleeping? For me, yes, I use they call it a CPAP machine, and that is pulling power all through the night. It also has a humidifier, so it depends on where I am. I may need the humidifier. It pulls a little extra power. So I got a 12-volt adapter so that I could plug that in, a cigarette lighter style. A 12-volt adapter is a cigarette lighter style. The 110, when we talk about 110 power versus 12 volt, the 110 would be a household type plug. So I tried to transfer everything I can from the household style plugs to a 12 volt plug so that I am using a little bit less energy. I'm not converting energy from a battery, my house battery, to 110 and back to a battery, 12 volt. So I basically jotted everything down, figured out what I needed, and then I went to my van outside and I measured. I used the solar calculator I mentioned on Renogy. I went to my van and I looked at that sucker and I said, okay, how much space is on my roof of my van? So people thought I was crazy. I was standing up looking around and I had my tape measure out. So I did my width of my van. Those vans are standard 6 feet body, outside to outside. And then I did the length. The length of the van is a 19-foot van, but that's not the length of my roof area, my surface area for my roof. So I figured that out. And then I went over to look at several panels to see how many panels could I fit on top. I decided I needed 300 watts of solar. And that was just my personal thing based on my calculation for what I need to run my life in a 24-hour period, or what I would like to run my life in a 24-hour period. Okay. And you may want to do the same thing. And then I measured the actual panels by going to the spec sheet of each item that I was looking to put on my roof. Spec sheets are wonderful things. You type in so-and-so 100 watt panel, Renogy, specs, and it gives you everything you want to know. So looking at the folks who may not need to use 100 watts of power, or maybe we don't have money, or we're just getting into this, or we're just driving around our SUV, they can consider fewer than 100 watts. There are some panels which are about 15 watts, and these are foldable. So 14 to 16 watt foldable little panels that might fit, be about this, and they're soft fold, trifold, and you can put them out on top of your roof or on the hood of your car, on the ground, and plug in your phone to them. Now they have a little pocket where you can hide your phone from the sun. So you can charge individually a phone or a tablet or something. This is just charging one single thing. Or maybe you can run a fan, a small USB fan. USB appliances are your friend. You can run a small fan. And that is the trifold. It's like a dual port. And you can also use those little ones to charge, I'm looking around here, to charge portable chargers. This is something I like to do. Even with my 300 watt panel now that I've graduated, when I first started out and I didn't have much power, I would charge, these are portable devices. So like this one, sometimes I'm going for a walk, I attach this to my phone and I use this, it has a USB, and I use this to power a device, or maybe I'm listening to an iPod or something and I'm low on charge. But this is something I can use after dark to power something, or early in the morning before the sun comes up. That's just extra power, portable. And so is this. This is a little bit more heavy duty and more expensive. This runs my laptop. And I use this if I go to a conference or something and I'm sitting at the table and I'm out of juice and there's no power around. So this has a plug in here for the 110 power, and then some USB, okay? So those are devices you might consider having as well. And the portable folding panels can help you with that, to put a charge on that. Okay. Those don't cost a lot of money. And I'm going to encourage you to go and research these and research your price, because prices change. So I don't want to tell you, I might tell you a price range, but I don't want to tell you too much about prices, because prices won't stay the same forever. And you might get a sale, catch a sale or a special or something, right? So let's move on to the 50 watt. On these smaller ones, you cannot run too much at the same time. It really needs you to, with a 50 watt panel, I think they start at about $120 and everything is plus tax. Please do your own research, check this for yourself. And the 50 watt panel, solar panel, Renogy has one, and they have a kit, and that has a charge controller included. So you don't have to worry about that. It includes a charge controller, and you have to buy your own battery though. So let's talk about batteries. You're gonna have a 50 watt panel that's pulling sun, and it's gonna allow you to store enough power if you get the right size battery. I recommend starting off with a 100 amp hour battery, and then you can always add another 100 amp hours and so on. 100 amp hour battery. This solar panel at 50 watts will allow you to run your basic phone, your basic electronics, your phone, your, I use one of these, your MiFi or Wi-Fi. This is my internet. When I'm on the road, this is my internet, whether I'm on the road or not. I have 2 or 3 of these different plans. And to charge your phone, my phone is a kind of a hog, and because I have running too many apps at once to watch a movie, what have you. And then also your tablet, your iPad, as I said, the USB fans we use in our vans to keep cool. And remember that you are not going to be able to run a microwave or something from that, but you are able to run some of these things at the same time. Whereas with that smaller 15 watt panel, you are running one thing at a time. So you can run 2 or 3 things, your fan, charge your phone, and so on. That's a difference with a 50 watt panel. Okay, you will not be able to run something like a fridge. Okay. Moving on to the 100 watt panel. Before I go, in the 100 watt panel range, I want to say this. There are some foldables. If you have a problem with space and rigid panels, you may want to consider the 80, within the 80 to 200 watt range. There are foldable panels by Dokyo. Some of you may be using those already. Renogy, and another company called ACO. ACO. I may not say it right. Anyway, those costs, I'll talk ranges now, between $80 to a little over $200, even up to $300. And this is 80 watts to 200 watt, but I'm talking about folding. So just make a note of that if you're interested in just space is an issue and you need to do a folding panel. Okay, so those range again from 80 watts to power your iPad, USB, your fan, your phone, on up to 200 watts. And that can power many things at one time. And once you get to 200 watts, you are able to power a lot more. So just keep that in mind for folding panels, Dokyo and Renogy. Okay, I'm assuming you're taking notes. And with that, you want to marry that with a 100 amp hour. Batteries are amp hours, Val. Amp hour battery. Okay, so looking at 100 watt amp hour, 100 watt panel or a kit. Renogy offers a kit also. You could take a look at that. And you would have to have the 100 watt panel. You would need to have probably an inverter with that. This is a point now where you may end up having to get your own inverter, optional. So you have to buy an inverter, and then you have the cost of an additional battery. So this is a 100 watt system. So I'm going to keep it as a 100 watt solar panel, a 100 watt battery. Now, something to remember about the 100 amp hour battery. Something to remember about the batteries. When you have a battery, a deep cycle that we're talking about, deep cycle, AGM battery, the AGM part just means that the lead acid inside is treated in a way where you can put that battery on its side. You can lay it over, and that's what I've done in my van. They're all lying on it on the side just for space, just because of the space I have. So, and then also the lead acid batteries, they're only meant to be used outside. You don't want to have a lead acid battery inside because it can cause problems with the acid being exposed, and it gives off fumes, and you don't want to breathe that stuff in. So you don't want to be sleeping in a place where you have those lead acid batteries. So the AGM batteries are a little more safe for us. Now, I said deep cycle batteries because deep cycle batteries, unlike starter batteries, are designed to be discharged deeper and over a long period of time. So your battery, you must consider that your battery can only be discharged 50%. If you go below 50%, you're going to be damaging that battery. You don't want that. You need to have that battery as long as possible so you take care of it as best you can. So the deep cycle battery at 100 watts with 100 amp hours with I've written watts, 100 amp hours with your 100 watt panel can only be discharged 50%. So you only will get 50 amp hours of use out of it. You can always add another battery if you feel like you need more storage, because what the battery is just storing that power. If you feel like it's a great summer day and you got 100 watts of power in there, 100 watts coming off of the solar panels, and you want to store more, you can. That will power your laptop, all the electronics we talked about before. So everything will, now we're up to where we're powering electronics and we can run them at the same time And we can even use a USB blender, not a regular blender like a Vitamix or something that's drawing like a power hog of 1200 watts, but a USB blender, some which are rechargeable. You can recharge all that stuff. Okay. Moving on to the 200 watts. There's a 200 watt Renogy kit, suitcase, 20 amp controller, and so on. Or you can go pick your own individual components out. But if you do a 200 watt, this is kind of the average that most people will power most people's needs. A 200 watt, when you get into a 200 watt solar panel and you marry it with a 200 amp hours of battery, right? So 200 watt, 200 amp hour batteries, then you're getting into the realm of powering your fridge. You can power a fridge. Now, when you're powering a fridge, you want to be looking at one of those fridges, which is top loading. It's efficient. It's made for RVs. Or, pardon me, not the RVs. It's made for us as vanners. So the Dometics, the Ingles. Ingles is a little more expensive. There's an Alpacool that's reasonable, that's cheaper in the smallest size. And you will want to consider also that when you have that fridge, you're running it all night. So the 200 watts solar and the 200 amp hours of battery will help you to run several things during the day while you're running the fridge and still charge what you need. So you'll have to monitor how much you're depleting your power. And again, you're only going halfway with those batteries. So monitor when you have several things on the charge at the same time. You can look at your charge controller and you can see, and also your inverter, and see how much you're depleting your power, how much that load is pulling from your batteries at that time. You'll get used to that and be able to play around with that. A 300 watt panel. This one, some folks have a 300 watt panel and then they're running 200 amp hours of battery. I have a friend, I'll call him Rick because that's his name, who's doing that. And he's using a 2000 watt inverter. 2000 watt inverter. I am using, Rick has 280. I'm going to give you Rick's and mine because we're both in this 300 watt range. So the 280 watts Rick is running on his roof of solar panels. I'm running 320 watts of solar on my roof. Rick has a 2000 watt inverter. I have a 2000 watt inverter. Let me tell you how I came to the place of having a 2000 watt inverter. I looked at what appliance am I cooking with. Every appliance has, or whatever appliance or gadget you're using, everything has a watt rating on it. So I'm using one of these, or if you have an Instapot or something, I'm cooking with one of these, and it's old-fashioned like your grandmother's griddle. Plugs in, but it's 1200 watts it requires to start this sucker up. Okay, it boils water fast, it cooks pretty fast, and I steam vegetables in it, but it's at 1200 watts. So I know that my inverter, this is where you have to check the measurement of your inverter. My inverter needs to be more than 1200 watts because this thing and this kettle is 1200 watts also, are the highest wattage draw for me in my home on wheels. Okay? Rick doesn't do much inside electrical cooking. Rick happens to be one of these guys who loves to cook outside. He carries around some kind of Dutch ovens, what we call in Jamaica, Dutchies, the Dutch pot. He cooks, he bakes, he does turkey, he does all kinds of stuff in this thing when we camp. And so he only felt the need for a 2000 watt inverter too, but I don't even think his was a pure sine. Mine is pure sine. His is a regular inverter. So batteries.
Excuse me, Val. Sorry to interrupt. You have 5 minutes left for your presentation and the chat is open for attendees to send questions.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks, Alicia. So here we go. So on the batteries for the 300 watt, I'm using 448 amp hours. Rick is using 200. As I said, Rick doesn't need to store much inside. He's not cooking with electricity. He's outside. He has a lot more coal that he's carrying for his little chimney things. And I'm not carrying any bags of coal. This girl needs to go to the city and be able to have her doors closed and cook with electric inside, stealth-like. Okay. So you can have anything from 200 to 400 amp hours of battery. It's really personal and according to your pocket. We also run our fridge freezer. Rick runs a bigger fridge freezer than I do, and so on. I am powering with mine, my toothbrush, these things I showed you, my laptop I charge several times a day. I have a NutriBullet, that's a 900 watt, so it fits within that 1200 watts of inverter I mentioned. My fridge freezer, my CPAP, my mattress pad is a 12 volt for wintertime, and I run also a 250 watt small heater and that electric kettle. The 400 watt system, Renogy panels, they have those too, and you'll have to do a couple of batteries. I recommend 400 watts of solar, at least 300 amp hours of battery, because you no point in having all of this solar bringing in power and you have nowhere to store it. One fellow, Desi, another viewer, he's using a small portable dorm fridge. Now those draw a little bit more power, but he is able to use that because he's now got 400 panels coming in. He gets topped up in the morning pretty quickly, and it's 300 amp hours of battery. He's moving towards 4. He powers overnight continuously his fridge, and get this, that diesel heater, like the S-Bar heater that are used in the Sprinter vans. He's running that all night in the winter. His Wi-Fi extender, cellular booster, all of these other gadgets he has, and that's what he needs, he wants. Renee, another viewer, she has a same system, but she's using a lot of fans, charges her laptop and phone for nighttime viewing, and her wand mixture, and occasional microwave. Remember, your microwave isn't staying on all the time, and you need to make it a 700 watt or even less microwave, and not like in Sticks and Bricks, 1100 watts of microwave. Microwaves are a big draw. So, again, I urge you to go to Renogy or somewhere else and look at a calculator. And there's also one thing, I'll give you a little formula for moving from panels and watts to amps. Take the source, like your panels, like 250 watts of panels, divide it by 12, which is 12 volts, and that will equal amps, 20 amps. So for example, 240 watt panel divided by 12 equals 20 amps. I'll see if there's anything else that I wanted to tell you right off the bat, but I'm sure you will have some questions. And the 400 watt system, by the way, when you include the batteries and the panels, you're getting into the range of about $1,600 at least, plus tax. So consider that sort of range from where we began to a 400 watt system of about 1,600. And then you need to probably pay for an install. These require, some people are installing themselves, but they require really a certain gauge of wire. So it's electricity and you can burn your van down. So please consult a professional, call Renogy, call these guys. They'll tell you what gauge of wiring to use. It's a little bit involved and they'll answer your questions. Alicia?
Thank you, Val. So before we start taking your questions in the order in which they came in, Val, we'll address Julie's question about how to watch the replay. Each of HOWA's Caravan class is recorded and then later uploaded to HOWA's YouTube channel for you to watch the replay. Also, for you to send your questions for Val, please click on your participants and find the chat, or three little dots on your screen, find the chat, type your question and press send. Thank you. Your first question, Val, it comes from Laura. What is the relationship between the inverter and the controller?
Aha. Thanks, Laura, for your question. So, the inverter and the controller. I'll tell you this way. Think about it in terms of the way the power is flowing. It's hitting the panels, the solar. It comes through the charge controller. The charge controller is merely a waypoint for the energy to go on its way to the battery. The charge controller is going to determine, as I mentioned before, how much charge. There's a way that the charge controller can slow down the charge, that the voltage that's going into the battery. When the battery's almost full, certain batteries require to be charged in 4 stages. When it's almost full, the charge controller says, slow down, hold on, we're almost there. I'm full, I'm stuffed. Okay, once we have the energy in the battery and we're moving on to the inverter, when we're going to use the power, the inverter allows us to either plug in this type of power, right? Or if we have USB, it's going to allow us to plug in USB. So the inverter is there basically on the output end to allow us to use it in the way that we need to use it. So it's a sort of indirect relationship. They both have a relationship with the battery, is what it is, from different ends. Hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. And Dr. Steve asked number and sizes of individual batteries using 12-volt 100 amp hour smart lithium iron phosphate batteries or similar.
Repeat that, the number, he's asking the number.
Number and sizes of individual batteries.
Number and sizes. Okay. We didn't talk about lithium phosphate that you're referring to is a lithium battery, right? We're not going to, for this discussion, we're not going to go into lithium. All I will say about lithium is that if you are, it's a little more expensive to have a lithium battery. So for someone who's new to this, they may not want to or be able to spend that. But if you have people usually graduate to a lithium battery once they've had a basic unit. The lithium battery allows you to deplete the power you're using below that 50%, almost to the end. And some of those batteries will require they be discharged pretty much all the way every 30, 40, 50 cycles. So lithium batteries, if you can afford them, are great because per unit, they're actually smaller and they hold a lot more power. The deep cycle batteries, as I mentioned, they come in anything from, you can get a deep cycle battery, like on your trailer, for example. Those usually come as a, what's called a group 27, like an interstate battery, group 27. And it won't even be quite 100 amp hours. It'll be like 80 something amp hours. And you might get a group 34 and it might be 84 amp hours or 90 something amp hours, not quite 100. So there's so many variety. You walk into Walmart or anywhere or look online and you will see so many different sizes. So try, if you're buying your battery, try to get as close to 100 or 107 amp hours as possible. Trojan has those. Full River has those. Just look around and, you know, you have to balance the price of your pocket with what you're going to get in terms of the battery and the weight and the size and where you're going to put it. Please secure your batteries. Do not be driving around with your batteries unsecured, because if you get into an accident, that is 40, 50 pounds of battery that is rotating with your vehicle or moving at 70, 80 miles an hour when your vehicle has come to a dead stop. Please be safe.
Wonderful. And Janet asked, is there a difference between solar panels, RV van versus house panels?
I think it's most of the size. For this, for what we talked about with solar panels, we talk about monocrystalline panels. That's what you'll see when you go to the Renogy or wherever it is really advertising panels for RVers and for vanners. It's really the size. The ones that you see on people's roofs are way bigger than the 6 feet, often bigger, because you have the surface area on the roof of a house of sticks and bricks. That's really what that is.
Wonderful. Dee says, what to use for small AC? This is great, thank you.
For small AC, like air conditioning? If you're getting into an air conditioning situation in your van, for example, those window units, I'm gonna suggest to you, I'm gonna answer this question, but I'm gonna suggest to you, there's a very good video Bob does with Jim, who was on last week, Jim Barnaby. Look for one which says running an air conditioning, something like this. Just Google, search it on the channel. Running an air conditioning with a trailer, with solar panels. You're going to see how many solar panels Jim takes, like 1,100 or something, to start up as an energy start small window unit for his trailer. That will give you some perspective. Okay. That's for solar. If you need to run an AC unit, you will need to buy a generator. There are 2 generators. You need about 2,000 watts of generator. There are 2 small generators like suitcases that Honda makes. And Honda makes a 1,000, and then there's another one that marries together with it, runs in parallel with it, which is another 100,000 watt. And you need those 2 to start up an energy efficient and to run that. And of course, the gas to run that. As nomads, we try to move with the weather. So instead of air conditioning, we make sure we have a fantastic fan or a max air or something. If you can afford 2 in your roof, that's great. If you have 1 and you open windows, you're pulling airflow. And you get out of the heat and you climb in elevation. So at this time of year, you should be in Flagstaff, Colorado, the Oregon coast, somewhere. And that is kind of how we try to do it.
Okay, Darlene has 2 questions combined. We'll take one at a time for the interest of time and getting to the others. Hi, Val. Thank you so much for doing this. There are so many details. My question is, since you started using solar, is there anything you wish you had done differently?
Not so much. I wish I had a fan in my vehicle, roof fan. But no, I do not. You know why? Because I took a while to research this. Last night, I found a document I had since 2013, a spreadsheet where I had started calculating what am I using. So, and Alicia talks about this in her videos. She talks about planning. Bob talks about it too. We don't do things just spur the moment willy-nilly, you know? It takes time to just make a document and go through and say, okay, what did I use today? And there's nothing I wish I had done differently. What I did was eventually I modeled I don't know how I came to this place, but I modeled my battery system after Bob's. I have the same battery system Bob has in his van. So I have 4 6-volt. I didn't talk about golf cart, but I have golf cart batteries under my bed. And I have the same system, 448 amp hours of power. I wanted to show you guys this thing. It's called a kilowatt. And this is something you can get at Home Depot. It plugs into the wall and you plug if you're trying to figure out how much power something uses, you plug this into the wall, your sticks and bricks, and then plug the thing you're using in here, and it will show you up here what the draw is. It's called a kilowatt. Just a tool. Home Depot. But no, I'm happy with my system.
And Michael asks, hi Val, would you mind mentioning the brand to look for as far as portable battery that you use for your laptop power, the one with the 110 volt?
This, I saw a woman working her computer at a conference. This is a Charge Tech. It's not charged right now because somewhere in the van, I have lost the part that plugs in here to charge this up. But this will last for a long time. It's a Charge Tech, T-E-C-H.
Okay, Dan says, you're a good teacher with a very organized presentation. Please bring us more of your experience. And D says, if you use a microwave briefly and it takes all the power away, how long to get the power back?
Okay, so many variables there because the size of the microwave matters and so on. There are 700-watt microwaves, and I think Bob even went smaller than that. And for you, if you're watching this, when I say Bob, I'm speaking about Bob Wells, Cheap RV Living. He has his forum, and he also has, you will be watching this on HOWA's YouTube channel. He also has a series of videos. If you go to, just search him on YouTube, he has like years and years worth of videos. So remind me of the question. I just talked about Bob and I forgot because I just thought about Bob.
Wonderful. So if you use a microwave briefly, takes all the power away,
yes.
How long to get the power back?
Thanks, Alicia. So the microwave, I mentioned Bob because Bob went one step further. Like Alicia is the frugalista. Bob is frugal with the power. So he has gone, I think, to the point where his microwave, he found a microwave with a dial. He doesn't even have a microwave with a light on there because the light still pulls power. So when you use these appliances, or if I'm cooking with this cooker I showed you, if I'm running my NutriBullet blender, you run those things which need the biggest power draw earlier in the day. The reason we do that is that if I'm running everything by 10 o'clock, that type of thing, before lunch, then my battery gets depleted, and depending on how much solar I have on my roof, then to pour into my battery, then I can fill up my battery in a faster time with the rest of the afternoon before the sun goes down. Keep in mind, the summer sun, now we know this, right? We have many more hours of sun in the day in the summer than we do in the winter. In the winter, we have about 6.5, and it depends on how far north you are in North America or on the planet, and how close you are to the South Pole, depending on the angle of sun. So you want to, I just consider it as 6.5 hours of daylight, of sunlight. So you basically want to use that, use your solar in the morning. You're not using your solar for a really long time. Usually you're making coffee, doing something for 10 minutes or something like that. If you're running it for 20 minutes, do not leave your vehicle. That is a lot of heat being generated through those cables, okay, through those wires, even if they're a thick gauge wire, to your battery. Please be mindful of that. So you shouldn't be like putting stuff to cook and whatever and walking away. And you should probably have a fire extinguisher in your rig.
Judy says, can you easily add your own system if you want more power over time? Can you easily add to your system if you want more power over time?
Yes, that's a good question. Yes. And when you go to Renogy's website, you're going to see, when you look at the kits, take a close look at what's called an expansion kit. So when you set it up in the beginning, you'll be able to set it up with your charge controller, especially because you have an MPPT charge controller, you have a PVM charge controller. You have two types. I won't explain them here. Just Google is your friend, or just go to that Renogy site. And I'm not promoting Renogy so much as they have a website which is kind of one stop for a lot of education. And having gone there last night, I see that they've kind of beefed it up, and they're really focused on van and RV. They have a specific section for us. So basically, yeah, you can expand by making sure that in the early days, you put in place an MPPT controller that allows you to build on with your panels. And you can always swap out the controller if that's all you had at the time, really.
Okay, and Kathy says, I understand the formula for amps, but could you talk a little more about amp hours?
Amp hours, amp comes from amperes, A-M-P-E-R-E-S, and we just say amps. Amp hours, without going too deep is just the unit of measure for how many hours we can use our appliance. So, for example, a fan takes 1/3, I think, 1/3 of an hour. When you're using something, you're running your fan. I'm going to run it while I'm getting dressed, half an hour, maybe run it before I go to sleep, 1 hour. So everything that's listed, oh, by the way, everything on your appliance has a label, and on the label you will see volts and you'll see watt volts, yes, but you'll see the watts, how many watts that item uses. So use that to help you calculate, but it's talking about watts per hour. So if you're only going to use something for a part of an hour, then calculate that for just half of that amount. With amp hour, it's the same thing. How many hours can I use my device? So when I was designing my system, I said, what am I going to use? Okay, I'm going to use a microwave. No, but I'm not taking a microwave. I decided not to. I didn't have room for it. But when I use this thing, if I need X amount of amps to make this work, then I'm only using it a max to cook anything or steam anything in that thing is 15 minutes. So that's a quarter of an hour. So I would add up everything like that I'm going to use. And then I know that I need a battery system that will take, must work with my CPAP and everything. I'm going to need something that maybe about 120 hours, amp hours of battery time over a 24-hour period. The calculator on Renogy's website will help you with that, but be prepared to do the work, to look at all your labels and find out how many watts or how many amps it draws. Don't be afraid to call the manufacturer and ask.
Okay, my question is, I have 200 watt of panels on my van. My charge controller monitors shows it is charging at only 0.2 amps from the panels. It appears that I'm not getting full potential from the panels. Any thoughts?
I don't know what size your battery is, or if you're in direct sun, you may have a panel. Some of the panels, if they don't operate well in partial shade. So like I have a Thule cargo box on top of my van. Sometimes I park, and in the morning, in the winter, when the sun is coming up, it's hitting that cargo box and it's barely eking over the side of the cargo box to hit the panel. When it hits the panel, it's hitting a part of the panel. If you're partially under a tree or you have gear on your roof that's blocking it, that could be one problem. Someone I camped with at RTR had a problem like that. It wasn't fully charging. She had to go back to the manufacturer and bug them over and over and over again and ask for what's called an energy audit. She had to ask for an audit, and it turned out there was a faulty component. If that doesn't answer your question, I'm on Facebook as Val Adam Wit. We can talk some more about it if you want.
Okay, and Jen says, thank you very much for this help. Please, what is the difference with pure sine inverter versus not? Or why buy and use the pure sine?
Thanks for that question. Pure sine inverters and the other inverter is called, I think, one is called, okay, I don't know if you remember your math class or maybe you don't. The sine inverters, the energy, the signal is doing this, like a sine curve, this undulating thing, right? With the other inverters, the cheaper, usually cheaper ones, it is in a step motion. So what's happening is our electronics need this type of signal. I'm calling it a signal, but the inverter is giving it the information like this, and it needs that. It's clean. It's a cleaner. It's considered cleaner, and so it's more expensive. So some people use two inverters. They use maybe one that costs a little less, and maybe just a 400 watt inverter for their electronics, their TV and so on. And then for bigger items that may be running rougher, like maybe they want to put in a bunch of saws and drills and they're outside doing different things, they don't care if they have the one that runs rougher, distributes kind of a rougher energy, which is that in that step design, which is not a sine inverter, but just a regular inverter. I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of it. So
Wonderful.
something like this, sorry, Alicia, something like this. This is my shower. Something like this has to get plugged in. This could get plugged into a regular inverter. It doesn't need to be in, you know, my laptop is sensitive, is more sensitive. So I would want to have that running cleaner power going through that.
Okay, and Jacqueline says, thank you so much. I have a CPAP machine. I am getting ready to start boondocking in my small SUV. I have a 60-watt solar panel and an ATOM generator. I would like to get more power and storage capacity to add to this. I am curious about your setup for your CPAP.
So my CPAP is running on my larger system, which is 300 watts. My main concern when I first started researching the CPAP was, are there any batteries? When I first started traveling, I didn't have the solar on the roof. I was using something I found at Wally World, which is the battery jumper chargers that you use to charge your car battery. That was not enough voltage or enough of an inverter to run, or enough battery capacity overnight to run my machine. So I called the manufacturer. You have to be careful with the CPAPs. They're very electronic these days. So you have to call the manufacturer, ask them what's compatible. If they have an actual battery, the batteries are expensive. My suggestion is to break the bank and have an extra battery that's compatible with your CPAP, because that's your health. If it stops at night, you stop breathing. So have a battery, that's one thing, have a backup battery. And then ask them also, call them and ask them, how many amps does my machine draw? One, on 110 power, and two, on 12 volt power. And ask them if they have a 12 volt adapter. Buy the 12 volt adapter. I did that. So I spent money on an extra battery and also on the adapter so I can plug in to my 12 volt. The next thing is you have to make sure that if they say that that CPAP is running, and if you need the humidifier or anything else, if it's running 5 amps every hour, then you have to say, how long are you sleeping? 10 hours? 10 5s, 50 amps of power from your battery is dedicated only to that CPAP machine. So you need a 100 amp hour battery, because you're going to deplete it halfway to 50 amp hours. And if that doesn't answer your question, Val Adam Wit on Facebook.
So it's from Kathy. May I ask what 250 watt heater you use? Thanks for all the great info. You're presenting a complicated subject very clearly.
Oh, thanks, Kathy. That was my prayer, to try to be clear. I found, and I think they're only sold, I found this at Wally World, I think they're only sold as we get into the fall, you know, because right now in the area where Wally World has the fans for summer and the USB fans and so on, they will replace that as fall approaches with the heaters. It's a square heater. They come in different colors. They have one little button. I don't remember the name of it. Soleil, S-O-L-E-I-L, I think. But you read the back of the label, it will say 250 watts. I can only run it for about 15 minutes in the morning early when it's cold to take the edge off, and it's sitting right in front of my face.
Okay, and Roxanne says, my SUV's roof is too small for the wattage I need. What do you suggest? Well,
we talked about those Dokio. I have a friend, another camper, who used the Dokio panels. And I'm going to send you over to Bob's channel. There is, if you go to Bob's channel and you just plug in solar, everything he's done with keyword solar will come up. He demonstrates these 16 watt panels and so on, but he also talks about those Dokios. He found the quality to be quite good. I remember, because I had considered that as well. Every decision that I've made for my solar and so on, I've researched all around, but I've also looked at anything that has come off of that channel. Then you just do your research. The information is out there, but you may need a fold out panel. And remember this, when you get to where you're going and you put your panel out, this is a difference between the rooftop panel and the panel you have to set out. When you get where you're going, that's when you start to charge your battery. When you get to camp and you stop and you put your panel out, that's when you're catching those afternoon rays. The difference, when you're driving, you're charging your battery as you're driving because the sun is hitting your roof. You're taking in solar and your batteries are charging. Also, you have the option when you set up your system to have what's called a solenoid, and that will allow you to, once you're driving the car, your starter battery is finished with taking care of the business of the engine and the alternator is working, the alternator will send any overflow energy to your battery. So that's using a solenoid when you have that professionally done. Some people can do it themselves, but having a solenoid installed so that your alternator will also charge your batteries.
Wonderful. Mike is suggesting that kilowatt is cheaper at Harbor Freight. And Judy says, doesn't the inverter use some power all the time?
The inverter uses power. Mine, if it's turned on, I can turn it on or off. So mine isn't always pulling power, but even if something's pulling power like that, it's minuscule. And what do you have to do? Do your arithmetic, add in for that. Something I did, and I do this with whatever I'm doing. When I calculated my power needs, what I did like an audit of my own needs, I actually calculated it and then I added 20%. So if I came up with, 100 amp hours that I think I need, my estimate, then I did multiplied it by 120 and added for that and just said I need 120 amp hours.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left for you to answer questions, Val. And Laura says, thank you. LaDonna says, thank you. This is great information delivered in a format easy to understand. I'm just in my planning stage and your information is so down to earth and practical. And then this question comes to us. So when I calculate how much energy it takes to run a fridge, the number on the fridge says a certain number of watts, but it doesn't run constantly. So do I have to estimate how much the fridge runs during 1 hour and do the calculations using the actual time the fridge runs?
No, I would just calculate whatever the wattage says for, like, I don't know how many, I'd be guessing. I don't remember how much a fridge runs. Mine sips power, so mine might be like 2 amps per hour. So let's say even if it's 5, okay, 2 times 24 hours. I am not going to assume my fridge goes on and off. I know it cycles on and off, but it's still using that power. So when the manufacturer calculated that power output or need, it's considering all of that the fridge needs to maintain a cool temperature of 40 inside for your food, etc. Or if it's a freezer, the manufacturer has done that work. Just multiply it by 24.
Wonderful. And Mike says, thank you, Val. That answer is fine. Melinda, this info is priceless and so appreciated. Thank you for demystifying solar all. Love you both so much. Okay, yes, thank you. Extremely valuable info in an organized manner, Jacqueline says. Thank you so much. There's a lot of thank yous and gratitude to you. Stephen said, thank you. Great information. Judy, awesome class. Thank you. I've been watching. Wonderful. I've been watching videos about solar for a year, and this video made it so much clearer. Wonderful. I'm math impaired. Your image description makes it so much sense. Thank you. So you're getting a lot of gratitudes coming into you, Val. Pure sine inverter is needed when running more sensitive electronics. The other inverter is called modified, just passing the info along. And okay. I have such a better understanding. Thank you for this coming from D. Well done coming from CDB. And Julie says I could put 400 watts on my roof. I just didn't want to pay that much. So my sweet spot was 60 cents a watt and no freight on the panel because the vendor is close enough to drive to. Okay, so it's 10 o'clock, Val. We do not have any more questions, but a lot of gratitude still coming in. So thank you, Val, for an in-depth presentation about solar size matters. Thank you all very much for attending. So HOWA's virtual caravan class. Do have a wonderful weekend. Any final thoughts, Val?
I just thank everybody for being here, and I just urge you to do your research. And I thank HOWA, the team, for putting this together. This is so valuable. I've been watching the other presentations as well. And I'm just honored and humbled that I was able to serve our community in this way. Thank you so much.